Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Okay. I'd like to call to order. We're going to start, I'll start first by saying that we're going to have the regular meeting after we have the public hearing. So I'd like to call to order the public hearing on the amended fiscal year 2020 budget and transfer of interest from debt service fund and the transportation fund to the operations and maintenance fund, and the transfer of $250,000 tax abatement from the educational fund to the debt service fund. Could we have the budget presentation? Roll call, please. Veronica.
Ms. Casvama
Here.
Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Gray.
Stephen.
Here.
Mr. Bouzier.
Here.
Aye.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
And Ms. Zori.
Here.
Okay, all rise for the allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Now the presentation. And Dr. Johns is not here at the moment, but I will start. Actually, I won't, because that's not. This is a posting of the budget for this year, the amended budget for adoption. That's the state form that it's listed on, which is a lot of numbers and lots of boxes. But Steve will have a little bit of a summary, so it's far less confusing. So I'll wait for Dr. Johns to come back. Wait here a second.
I think while we're waiting for Dr. Johns, I'll say that while the board wasn't necessarily unanimous on granting the tax relief, I will say that we're all proud that we are in the financial position to even consider granting tax relief at this time. So thank you to Dr. Lind and the staff, the teachers, the community. We all appreciate that we've made it to this point and what was really a pretty scary time. So. Do you have any more to add?
No more tap dancing to do. He went to the office to see if we could turn the fan down. The fan is causing some background noise here. So
Maybe describe what we are going to be doing.
So we are amending the budget. Every year we give our best estimate of the budget that's approved in October for the public. Our fiscal year is from July 1st to June 30th. So we are coming at the end of the year and we need to adjust the budget. We give our best guess at the beginning of the year of where things are going to lie. And because of this year, different than expected expenses in different categories, we felt that we needed to adjust the budget because we were going over our expenditures in some areas. We were under in others, but in general, we want to make sure that we are as accurate and transparent as possible. So the best practice is to do a budget amendment at this time of the year. And then that helps our auditors too, with a little more accuracy of what our activities were this year. So we are adjusting that budget. We spent more than we wished this year for a variety of reasons. Our revenue was down this year because of closing school for Activities like track and field, which is a big revenue generator. It's a lot of fun for our kids, but that's, we do generate revenue from that. We generate revenue before and after school club, and we stopped collecting money for that as well. And so our revenues are down and our expenditures essentially stayed the same. We saved in a couple areas. We saved a little bit in substitute costs, but those extra expenditures of buying extra sanitizer and cleaning supplies, and we bought two electrostatic sprayers, one for each school. All those started to add up, and so we just need to adjust.
And then the transfer of interest from debt service fund and the transportation fund to the operations and maintenance fund. Sorry. That didn't sound right.
So at the end of the year, we have to transfer interest, or we have the opportunity if we have a fund balance where we can transfer that interest from one fund to the other. And this year that was less because of the drop in interest rates. So that didn't help us as a school district. When we have cash in the bank, we get a little tiny bit of revenue from that, but it doesn't, all of it adds up. When our fund balances are carried out over the course of the year, that does help, and we're able to transfer that $50,000, $60,000 into other funds to help boost that revenue. So that's part of this process as well.
And then the transfer of the $250,000 tax payment to the education fund, from the education fund to the debt service fund.
Sure. So we abated the taxes out of the debt service fund to alleviate the debt service load, but we have to replace that with something, and that had to be a resolution that we did last year. Over a year ago we did that, but now we have to do it this year, so that's part of that process. And so we took that out of the ed fund and put that back into debt service to pay that off. What that allows us to do is that's a 1 year impact on our budget. If we did it a different way, if we abated taxes out of the ed fund itself, we would lose that revenue in perpetuity going forward. It'd be great for taxpayers, but in a situation like this, when our budgets are tightening and our funding in other areas is drying up, that would not bode well for the district.
It just wouldn't be a safe thing to do.
Yes, it would be far more risky. So doing it the way we did it is far less risk than abating out of the ed fund. And we knew we couldn't afford it long term anyway. That allows us to continue to tax out of the ed fund. The debt service fund, most of that money is for our bonds that are coming due in 2024. So we were paying those off, and unfortunately, the way they were, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on when you owned a home in our district, those are ramping up the payments at the end of that term. And that seemed like a good idea back in 2004 when those were issued, when the economy was booming and houses were moving and we had more houses, because by now you would have more units paying off that money. We wouldn't feel the same increase that we do now, but because of the way that they were structured and the housing stopped in 2008, really stopped. Now we are seeing very high increases each year in our taxes because you're dividing up the same number of units. Taxing units are paying now about $500,000 more each year in taxes. So it's a big ramp. But we have 3 more years after this, I believe. 2024 will be our last payments on that. So it's gonna be painful for the next several years, and then it's gonna drop off, and we'll see some relief. Homeowner will see relief, and currently it's about 25 or 26% of the Milburn tax bill is going to bonds. That's not any operating costs. That's just right to paying off our bonds, which is the mortgage essentially in common terms for the Milburn Middle School.
And unfortunately, that land that the school was built for, that development is no longer ours. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, there were 2 different subdivisions that were planned at that time and were in the books as far as plotted out, and they never materialized. That would have been another, one of them I believe was 50 to 80 homes, and the other was another 50-ish, 75 homes that would have been providing students and more people to spread the load out, but that didn't happen. So we're stuck for now. So it's very painful for now, but it will get better. Dr. Johns, we're just doing the budget. Here, did you have any
I didn't have a
summary?
presentation.
Okay.
I did have the summary sheet that showed what the changes were from the original to the current.
Is that in your board notes?
I emailed it.
Yes.
Just the summary?
It was at the end of the business report,
Yeah.
right?
Business.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the business report.
Okay. So let me pull up the business report real quick.
Yeah, this makes it really easy to see. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Left side's revenue. Oh, this one. The left side's revenue and the right side is expenditures. And I showed the adopted 2020 budget that we did back in September, the change that we advertised and put on public display on May 11th. And then the tweaks that I made, because at that point in time, I think we only had all of the expenditures and revenues through March or April. And so now that we've gotten to the point where we have the expenditures for this board meeting, as well as all but one payroll, it made it so that I could make it a little bit more realistic and look at where things need to be. The one thing you may notice, originally I was going to move money from the transportation fund into the ed fund, but because of the new parking area for the buses, if I pay that portion of it out of the transportation fund, then we get to amortize that for 10 years and submit it with our transportation claim, and we'll get a portion of that back from the state over a 10-year period. So I felt it was better to dip a little bit lower in reserves and know that we're going to get that income every year when I file that transportation report.
Okay, the budget is presented. Resident presenters. There are none. So and normally I would invite the resident presenters to speak, but there being none, we move on to the board clerk reports names of those residents. Just say, okay, we're done with that. Okay. Then there being nothing else that we need to do here, we just needed to present it.
I don't know
and
if
hear
you
anybody
mentioned, but we also included in this the 2 transfers, one from the transfer of interest from debt service and transportation fund to the.
Yeah, Dr.
Chris,
Lee went through that.
You went over that,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Great. Then I'd like to move that we adjourn the public hearing. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, we should do a roll call. Never mind. We're going to do a roll call.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Bring,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr. Buziak,
Yes.
Ms. I. Yes. Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
and Ms. Cassandra.
Yes. The hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Now we'll go to the regular meeting. I'd like to call the regular meeting to order. We can dispense with the roll call and the Pledge of Allegiance. And I don't have no public comments, right? Okay. As always, during these times, if anybody wants to make a comment based on what they're seeing on the agenda, that they may do so by emailing the school board, or you give a link when you invite everyone. Yeah. So, and we have no additional non-action items. And then we're on to action items. Item 6A, adopt the fiscal year 2020 amended budget.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2020 amended budget.
Second.
Could you, just for the purposes to help Veronica, if you could say your name before or after you second, that would be great. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Oh, did you want to ask if we had any?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any? Thank you. This is so interesting. Every meeting is a new section, keeping us on our toes. Does anybody have anything to say about the amended budget? Anyone? Okay. It's okay. Now roll call, please, Veronica. Thank you.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Buziak,
I'm voting present on the budget.
Ms. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Castle,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Item carries. On to item D, the approval of construction change orders as follows.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the construction change orders as follows. Change order number 1, fixed falling retaining wall, the amount of $13,200. Change order number 2, wayfinding signage in the amount of $4,204. Change order number 3, additional striping seal coat, $13,975. Change order number 4, required undercut of subgrade and installation of CA1 and geograded bus area to eliminate groundwater, cost of $8,514.85.
Seconded by Mr. Murphy.
Oh, thank you.
I just asked that I be reminded of what the original total estimate was for all that work. For everything.
Just for the paving, yeah. For all the paving and coating.
Okay, so there's about 40,000 in total amendments. But that includes the signs.
And the
Signs
retention.
and the retaining wall wasn't even on the radar.
Right, 18, okay. So really less than 10% total amendment to the original estimate. Okay.
That's a good question.
Is there anything anybody else would like to ask?
I'm sorry. Sean, what was your question? I did not
Question
hear
is
that.
my question is what the total estimate originally was. Dr. Johnson said approximately 240,000. I said there were 40,000 in amendments total, but that also included approximately 20,000 worth of work for the signs and the retaining wall, which was not part of the original estimate for the paving work that was done. So in total, there's a just under 10% increase from the original estimate.
Yeah, so technically, actually, some of these aren't even really change orders. They're things really.
Yeah,
They're
they're change
additional.
orders. They're change
Yeah,
orders.
they are.
They are? Okay.
They're technically change orders, but we had the paving company do them. So
Oh,
like
I
the
see.
retaining wall really wasn't related to the paving.
Right,
Like
right.
it
So
was-
that's why I say.
But they do that. type of
Only
work,
represents
so we
just
had
under
them do that.
10% of the increase. Okay.
So the paving company did all of these in that letter?
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
And there will be one more in the amount of $2,075. We're done. And I
Okay.
typically don't have this many change orders. There are a few things that got left off the drawings. As for those errors.
Yeah. And the question is, I mean, we had to have the retaining wall redone anyway, because that was a structure. We had,
And the other major thing was some of the areas that weren't included for seal coating and striping. Some of the playground areas that we had to add.
okay. Any further questions, anyone? Okay. Roll call. Veronica?
Mr. Kuziak?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Oren?
Yes.
Ms. Casman Trent?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Passes on to item C, the approval of middle school National Geographic Social Studies curriculum.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the middle school National Geographic Social Studies curriculum in the amount of $47,616.25.
Second, Mr. Murphy.
Okay. Do we have discussion on this?
At least a comment. After looking at the National Geographic, the social studies, the samples, and doing some other research into it, if you want to put it that way. Again, they claim to be unbiased sources, but there is no guarantee that any of this information is going to be presented to the students in an unbiased way. And I think that's still a gap in probably what we should be looking at. National Geographic is not necessarily known for its middle of the ground positions.
Does anybody else have a comment? I will say that
I mean, I would,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just gonna say, I'm excited about it. I think it's a good way to go, and looking into it, I'm intrigued. I think the kids will like it a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate that you provided us, Dr. Lynn, with the books, all the books, so we could read through them. Because normally Denise and I would make a school visit to talk to the teachers and see them using it in action. But I was able to read most of the book, and I felt like they went out of their way in the book to phrase things in a way that was very carefully not biased. Like, this is what some people think, this is what other people think, what do you think? Inviting students to think for themselves. So I thought that was, I was pretty impressed by that. And I liked the way they covered things. I thought it was engaging. I thought visually it was fun. And I'm excited for, I mean, considering they're using the, right now, social studies books that have the Twin Towers on them. That says it all. So it's going to be a vast and exciting improvement to social studies. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, I would just say that the resource that was used to determine whether it was biased or not was a scientific body that assesses it. So, and they hadn't reviewed the social studies curriculum to determine whether it was biased. But in fact, it was National Geographic itself as a magazine. So with that being said, I do see bias in it, but I think that's the modern era. You're going to get bias. I think there could be bias in content, in a measure of content, and what amount of attention is paid to each aspect of something. But I think it's visually engaging, and if that's what it takes, to get kids engaged, I think it's a good thing that it is visually engaging. But yeah, there's certainly bias there. And the source that was used, I wouldn't recommend using that as a source to determine whether a social studies program is biased or not. That's the only thing I would caution in the future.
Okay. Anybody else? have anything? Okay. Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, one more thing. Jason, you said that they can there is an opportunity as well to incorporate current events through the online portion, right?
What do you mean?
Just within kind of within the structure of it. You said the web-based like the books obviously are printed, but the web-based portion is continuously updated, right?
The web-based port, because it's web-based, it can be updated. The content can be updated to include more current events versus waiting like our twin towers that are still in the skyline of New York City. That's they're there. This can update things like that every. So that's the advantage of anything online as they create more content and put it in there.
I will say also, I did joke about the Twin Towers, but I am glad that we waited to get the National Social Studies standards before we invested money in a curriculum. And I'm grateful to the teachers who have figured out a way to piecemeal their way through these years while we've been waiting for them to define those standards, and we've been and to develop curricula that would be appropriate for them. Because I think in the end, we saved money, and we did it because our teachers are resourceful, and it allows us to be careful.
That this cost is right in line with what was originally presented to us 2-3 meetings ago. Glad to see that.
We don't like that. Actually, we got more in here than we did. I think the total was 48,000 something. I added a couple of teachers' manuals for more.
Okay, good. Yeah, you said.
So more resource teachers could have along help the kids. So yeah, that was great. And then it was the shipping. So the cost went up, but then the shipping. I asked if they could reduce the shipping, and they took $1,800 off that. So brought it back down to lower than what it was originally. Good. Otherwise, I was sweating. No, I can't do that. How was that?
Does everyone feel comfortable about voting now, or is there anything else? Okay. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Ms. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Casabon Latoya,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Goudiak,
No.
Okay. The item passes on to D, approval of the superintendent evaluation.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the superintendent evaluation tool.
Second, Mr. Murphy?
Denise, will you take this?
Sure, there's nothing new that's been added except for one thing. I shouldn't have said nothing new, but Jim had a suggestion of us adding one more option. If you could just scroll down a little bit. One more option into the rating scale. And so that's a 0, not applicable, or no response. So if someone, maybe they didn't have a response to that particular question, or it didn't really apply, then they had that option. So that's the change that's been made since the last meeting that we had, but otherwise it's all the same.
Does anybody have questions or comments on this? The idea will be to hopefully approve this today, and then we can have our evaluation on schedule in July. and be ready for the next year's district goals to be made in August.
Well, one comment, Carissa, the reason for the 0 or not applicable is because further down in the document, there are a number of things, a number of items that it would be extremely difficult in order to evaluate someone on. They seem to be more of a general, more general comments as to what Dr. Lind may have been working on or doing, and there really wasn't anything to gauge the progress against. So that was the reason for trying to come up with an NA. And near the end, near the bottom, there was at least a half a dozen items that kind of fell into that category. They were more statements as opposed to being worded as goals.
I think we all, I appreciate your perspective, and I think Denise readily added the NA, and so I think we can probably move forward with this tool.
Oh no, what I was trying to do was explain the reason for it. I don't know if that was out or not.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I think it's probably helpful more than just to you, Jim. I think it was good. Is that? Because then if not everybody thinks the Likert scale is appropriate for an item, they don't have to use that. They can just add their comments to the end of it. I think that's great. Thumbs up. Okay, all in favor of adopting these? No, we don't have to roll call this. Oh,
I know, but it's easier.
oh, we're roll calling everything. Okay, all right. All right, then roll call please, Veronica.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Caswell-Latrell,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Buziak,
Yes.
Ms. I.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it carries. Now, everyone, for the evaluation in July, it's typical that Dr. Lynn would fill it out first, and then we would fill it out, and then we'll all come together in closed session to discuss this, and then I'll meet Jason afterwards. Does that sound good? In the July meeting? Okay, great. So if between now and then, you can work on that, everybody?
Question real quick. If there for objective evidence of meeting some of these goals or supporting documentation, who should contact? We talked about that last year
Yeah.
when we met. We had that.
More out and rating, I'm not going to rate myself, but provide information, any information that I have.
That's what I remember last year. Yeah.
So I'll do that.
So we could have that for the July cow, and then would your idea be to do I think we should probably maybe hold off on the actual evaluation until the regular meeting.
Yeah,
So
because
we
then
have,
it'll give us time to,
Because last year was very helpful to see the
Yes.
supporting documentation.
yes. I thought that was really healthy from an organizational standpoint. Yeah, good. So next meeting, he presents. Then the meeting after that, we come with our forms filled out, and then after that meeting, we have our evaluation talk. Then I meet with him, and then August we start with. Okay. Thank you, everyone. On to item E, approval of EdRed membership in the amount of $2,250.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the EdRed membership in the amount of $2,250.
Second, Sean.
Do we have conversation on this?
I'd just like to say, I think suburban advocacy at this point is going to be more important than it has been in many years. With the dollars tightening, and the approval of the budget being based upon a federal loan that has not been secured. I think they're grasping at straws, so, yeah, definitely support membership.
I'll just say, having gone to some of the meetings, I went to the last one, Zoom. I think it's really important, and having spoken to some of the other leaders that are members, it's good that we as a tier two school are in this organization, because largely it represents tier 3 and 4 schools, and it's been good for them. I heard from someone else, it's been good for them to hear perspective from schools that may think twice about buying membership, that have bought membership, and they're able to see that perspective on what it will do if they say eliminate that whole provision where they cut tier 3 and 4 schools before they cut tier 1 and 2 schools, because it's been allowed them to see what life is like when you actually live a little closer to the edge. It's a totally different perspective, and I think it's been helpful for all of us to hear each other. Okay, any further comments? Okay, let's vote.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Castle-Navarette,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Bouvier,
Yes.
aye.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Okay, the item passes. On to the approval of opening closed session minutes.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of opening closed session minutes.
Second, Murphy.
Anybody have a question about the closed session minutes?
So just as a comment for the public, the closed session minutes, every 6 months, the board reviews them and decides whether or not they should be open or remain closed. And there's a variety of reasons of why they should remain closed. If they mention a specific student's name, or there's any identifiable information, or there's an employee disciplinary information that would be illegal for us to share, we have to close. So, but we are to review them, and they go all the way back to as many as we have. And so continue to review them every 6 months, and then we open generally the ones in the last 6 months. Half of them are open for whatever reason, because we may discuss things like negotiations, collective bargaining negotiations with the teaching staff or the paraprofessionals, and those after the settlement and after the agreement is written, they can be open, because now it's all public information. So that's what this is representing.
So the only reason we would hold back as closed minutes would be for privacy HIPAA reasons.
Yep. HIPAA or FERPA or employment protections, employee protections, all of that stuff.
Okay. Does anybody have anything they'd like to discuss about this? Okay. Ms.
Ms. Castle-Navarette,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Bouvier,
Yes.
Ms. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Passes. On to item G, the approval of board policies.
I'd like to make a motion to approve board policies, which include 250, board member term of office, 100, board member conflict of interest, 120, board member development, 140, communications to and from the board, 150, committees, 240, board policy development, 250, access to district's public records, 260, uniform grievance procedure, and 340, superintendent.
Second. Murphy.
Have comments or discussion on this? It was nice to see some real straightforward
Yeah,
policies.
There's nothing.
Some no-brainers, some footnote changes. That's what we like to see. Not a lot to discuss in this. Okay. However, if anybody wants to discuss, we're not preventing anyone. Okay. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Guziak,
Yes.
aye,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Casson LaTourette,
Yes. Yeah, item passes. On to item H. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Gary White as the treasurer and approve the treasurer's bond in the amount of $5 million.
Second. Murphy.
Dr. Johns, you could just give us a little.
Typically, the board has had someone be the solicitor who kind of reviews records and makes sure an extra person who comes and reviews payroll, does some of those additional items, as well as he's the main signer on the checks, and Dr. Lind also signs. To keep that separate from my position, so that to limit, especially in small district, it's very difficult to keep all those duties separated. So having a school treasurer then creates an additional area where you've got somebody else that's kind of overseeing things. And the treasurer's bond has to be filed with the regional office by June 30th each year. So the board has to reappoint the treasurer every year, and then we have to, and this year they're actually allowing us to file electronically. But I think we have to get Jim's signature, so we'll have to coordinate that prior to June 30th.
You hear that, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about? Everyone remembers this probably from last year, reappointing Gary.
Typically, the treasurer's bond is kind of in the neighborhood of where your high point is. And I think that we have had this year, some months that we were up around 6 million. But for the longest time, we only had like $1 million or 2 million. So it was 2 years ago that we bumped it up to 5 million. So we may want to consider, depending on how things go this year, pumping that up as our budget continues to increase.
Any further questions? Okay, roll call please, Veronica.
Mr. Gray, Mr. Gray,
Stephen. All right. We'll just move on.
Mr.
All right, I
Guziak,
lost you guys for a minute.
That's okay.
Yes. I was trying to say it. It's kicking me out here.
Mr. Guziak,
Yes.
Ms. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Ori,
Yes.
Ms. Casson LaTourette,
Yes,
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
the item passes. On to item I, approval of resolution to transfer interest.
I'd like to make a motion to for the approval of the resolution to transfer interest.
second,
And again, this is, we went over this in the budget hearing, the special hearing. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, roll call please, Veronica.
Mr. Buziak?
Present.
Ms. I?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
yes,
Ms. Ori?
yes,
yes,
Mr. Gray?
yes,
Okay, the item passes. On to item J, approval of resolution to transfer $250,000 from the ed fund to the debt service fund for the tax abatement. Now, we're not voting on the tax abatement. We did that a year and a half ago. This is, we're just transferring $250,000 from the ed fund to the debt service fund.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the resolution to transfer $250,000 from the education fund to the debt service fund for the tax abatement.
second, Murphy,
Okay, do we have discussion on this? Okay, then roll call please, Veronica.
Ms. I?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
yes,
Ms. Ori?
yes,
Ms. Casella Trent?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
present,
Mr. Gray?
yes,
Mr. Buziak?
No.
Okay. Is that it? The item carries on to the consent agenda. I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda, which includes the annual membership in the Lake County Educational Services at $3,209, board meeting dates for 2020, 2021, approval of minutes from the committee of the whole meeting, May 18th, 2020, treasurer's report and approval, bill approval and payment authorization, activity account, personnel report, and that is it.
Second, aye.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull out for discussion? Okay, roll call please, Veronica.
Mr. Murphy?
yes,
Ms. Ori?
yes,
Yes.
Mr.
yes,
Mr. Gray?
yes,
Mr. Buziak?
Yes.
Ms. I?
Yes.
Okay. On to item 7, the item carries on to item 7, information discussion items. We're talking about the property tax relief grant.
You put that up.
No, I didn't.
That could be a carryover from last year.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
because there is the property tax relief grant was something that we did in January
Yeah, we didn't get it.
that we applied for and we did not get.
Oh, I
thought
was
we
so
were flying
excited.
again, and I was like, oh, yay.
I thought there was another pool of money.
No pool of money, no property tax relief, really no. But we do apply for the property tax relief grant, the first 2 years that it's been available, and hopefully they continue that from the state. It's a replacement of, if we say we're going to abate $1 million of taxes, we would get $1 million-ish or less from the state to replace that money. So that would be lovely if we could do that, but no, we've been just outside of that eligibility for the last 2 years.
We came close to
We're
this.
very close this year. We're right in the bubble. Out of the 862 districts or 65 districts, we were, I think, 70-ish, 80th this year, and they went up to 50, first 50, 40 or 50. So we're close, but we did not get it. So I apologize for putting that up in discussion.
It's okay, I didn't catch it either. So, yeah, it looked like a perfectly reasonable thing to be on the agenda, and I did not question it. Okay. On to item B, return to learn update.
All right, so there's lots of things that have been discussed as far as return to learn and what learning might look like in the fall. We are awaiting state guidelines. We were originally told June 1st, and then the second week of June, and the third week, and now we're in the third week of June. So we're awaiting the state guidelines, and we've been working on different ideas leading up to this. We've had committees going for the remote learning plan because we're anticipating that if we are able to start school in the fall, which seems like a great chance that we will have students actually on campus in some form in the fall, for as long as possible, that when someone comes down ill, if there's a lab confirmed case of COVID in our school, there will be certain protocols that the health department will require us to follow. One, the way it is now with the CDC, this is CDC guidelines, not Lake County Health Department or Illinois, but the CDC is stated that if you have one case in your school, that classroom is quarantined for 14 days and not allowed to, including the teacher and any contacts that they may have had. So you do contact tracing with that group, and that group would be quarantined at home for 14 days before coming back to school, and then they can, if they're obviously fever-free and symptom-free. If there are 2 cases in your school, that means that the entire school is quarantined for these 14 days for huge closed school. So with that sort of bar, we're hoping that we'll have more flexibility than that, because with that sort of bar, I don't know how any school district will ever open, especially if you have large schools like ours. Ours is we're a small district, but we have relatively large elementary schools. So with 750 students and another 150 employees here every day, the chances of no one having COVID-19 is pretty slim at this point, but we don't know. Or maybe we'll be fine and it won't be an issue, but that'll be a challenge. So anyway, all that to say, we've been talking about a remote learning plan. What will it look like if we have to go into a remote learning plan again, because that's likely. Our latest thought is that how are we going to transition from remote learning to in-person learning to remote learning to in-person learning to remote learning, if that's the case. So we want to be flexible with that. And can we design the remote learning plan such that no matter what the scenario is and no matter where the location of our children are, it looks very similar. So when we get them in the building, great, that's bonus time, but when they're not in the building with us in person is with our teaching staff, it looks very similar as far as structure, the time, the start of the day. We talked about staggering the start times for keep fewer children on the bus. We're just starting these conversations, and it's brainstorming sessions, but having a staggered start time so we would have 2 routes, bringing students to the elementary building and maintain one route at the middle school. We talked about it every other day scenario for students if we have to have 50, if we can only operate at 50% of capacity, if we have to operate under the current guidelines, we would have to operate at 30% capacity in our schools, and that would be having a class of kids, and they would only be able to come to school every 3rd day. I know other school districts are talking about every 3rd week having the kids come into school, so you'd be remote learning, or you'd be in school in person for 1 week, and then you'd be home for 2 weeks remote learning, while the other kids rotate in for a week. In every scenario, there's pros and cons. There's all kinds of issues. Childcare is a huge issue. There's for not only our teachers, but our parents, of course. It's just a very complicated process. We've talked about PPE, what will be required. How do you keep the bathrooms as clean as possible when kids come to school and they're allowed in the bathroom. We'll have to do spacing in the hallways. As far as keeping kids apart, they're talking about one-way hallways. Ours are fairly wide at this building because it's a newer building, so we're very fortunate, at least the main hallways. But in some hallways, would have arrows and the kids would only be able to go one way around, kind of like at Menards and other stores. I've seen those arrows on the floor and different markings on the floor to keep people 6 feet apart. Some school districts are about taking temperatures when the kids come in. Other school districts say that's impossible. We're not going to do it. If we have to take temperatures, then we're not going to have school. These are all the conversations. So I have a weekly meeting with all of the superintendents in Lake County. Weekly meeting with our Grays Lake feeder schools, and a weekly meeting, almost weekly now, with our Antioch feeder schools. And so we're trying to, and Warren too, we're in contact with Warren too. Trying to just help each other out and brainstorm what's possible, what's realistic to do for teaching staff and for kids and for parents to make this as best as possible. It's not going to be easy no matter what we do. It's not going to be, we know it's not going to go back to the way it was at this point. It's just, we're just not going to be able to do that based on the guidelines that I've seen. They're not going to say, hey, just go have schools. So will that be a shortened school day? Will the kids be able to come every day for a short period of time if we can have 25 students in a class? Will it be, they'd have to remain in that class? Then do we do specials remotely so they would come to school and do math and ELA and social studies and science and then go home, and specials would be remotely, or all of those. All these ideas are still possibilities. And with each idea, the details are tremendous. That, along with different regulations for human resources aspect of this. What happens if there's a sub? What's the protocol for when a teacher gets sick? What's the protocol for when a child gets sick? What if they come to school sick? Do we have an isolation room? How do we protect them? Will kids have to wear masks all day? Everything I've seen so far is yes. Teachers would have to wear masks all day, or at least it ranges from suggesting that they do, or if possible, or some of the language. And then I see things, rumors that local districts will have a lot of control over what we do within a certain boundary. So we don't know. That's why it would be nice if the state said, okay, you can have this many kids in a classroom, and this is what happens if you have one person in your school district that's sick, and this is what happens if there's two, this is what happens if there's three. We're just not there. We don't have that information yet. So there's a lot of spinning, a lot of talking through different scenarios, a lot of good ideas, some not.
So it sounds like whatever ISBE says in their guidelines, we have to comply by what CDC says.
No, the CDC is the federal level.
Right.
So we would comply by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. And every guideline that they put out is co-guidance. So the Illinois Department of Public Health, along with the Illinois State Board of Education, which is good. They should be approving. They should align. The CDC is tough because that's a federal. So they're kind of saying, well, states, this is our guidelines overall, but as a state, you have decisions to make. And even our state has said, okay, there's 4 different zones. It might look different in zone 4 than in zone 1. It's really going to be challenging to work through because we don't have to follow the guidelines perhaps, but then what if something happens? No one is going to want to accept that.
Jason, has there been consideration given to testing the staff for temperatures?
Oh, yeah,
I think
That would be an easy
that's a
one.
key consideration, right?
that's an easy one.
Yeah.
So there's different formats where every day as part of your attendance, the staff would go through a checklist of symptoms to make sure that no one has symptoms when they come in. And that would be part of your staff attendance. And then there's the same thing with students.
But you do have to be careful with that, because if you're documenting all that, and that becomes part of the staff, it becomes part of their medical records. If you're doing it with students, it becomes part of their temporary student medical records as well.
So that's why there's all kinds of talk.
So what I've heard is you're better to only document the ones who have a symptom. You can still go through the checklist, but you don't keep those records. You only write it down if there's something that somebody has, or if they have a fever or whatever.
That's why every idea that's thrown out there, there's a counter
always
idea,
something.
and then you send that up the flagpole to policymakers, and lawyers, and they say, nope, this is the issue, and they can so
I'm just hoping we run out of fireworks.
it's a big challenge. And then you have school districts like Glenbrook who just said we're remote learning next year. That's it. This is what we can do, and this is what we can plan, because the logistics are so complicated to bring kids in. But we have said, and I firmly believe that anything we can do to get the kids in the building is better than not. So if we can, even if it means every other day or a shortened day, as much as we can get them face to face.
And so of the community.
And the community weighed in 80%.
Absolutely affirm.
80% of our community affirm that too. And we'll still give options for kids who have medical issues or other reasons that they don't want to participate in in-person learning or aren't comfortable. We want to be planning for that. So, but it's a lot to planning for 3 different groups of students all in the same day. If it's an every other day situation, we'll be planning for students that are home remote learning all year, while students who are at school, and then half of a class at school, half of a class at home every day. It's not realistic for one teacher to be managing all of that content. That's impossible. And so if that's impossible, then what are the alternatives? So that's all, we're looking at all of those different scenarios.
Excuse me, Jason.
Sir.
Your audio broke up a little bit, and I think you may have touched on my the question I was going to have. The results of the survey, there was a percentage of families that said if there wasn't a vaccine, they probably wouldn't send their kids. And then I believe there was another percentage that said that if the kids have to wear masks, they weren't going to send the kids to the classroom. And I think you may have touched on that, but I wasn't able to catch all of it.
Thanks. 7% of families said they would not send their kids at this point. That was a hard.
So that's regardless of anything that's going on. Vaccine, masks, no masks, 7% of the families will not send their kids.
Yeah, I would think a vaccine.
No, unless there was a vaccine, yeah.
A vaccine would be.
Okay. And the only reason I'm mentioning that, I thought that may have been part of the survey questions or part of the feedback that I may have read, but that's the only reason I'm mentioning a vaccine at all. So, but 7% of the families are not looking at sending their kids back in the fall.
Correct. And
Okay.
then an additional 27% were undecided. And based on then the feedback that we were reading, like you read, and I read some of the comments, it was if they have to wear a mask all day, I'm not sending them, or I'm not sending them if we don't have to wear a mask all day, because then they won't feel safe, because they won't be as protected. So it's going to depend on what it looks like in the fall, I think, and what information is out there, what the health department is saying. everything could change in 2 months. It's
Yes. All right, thank you.
a good question. So I'm anticipating at least 20%, if I had to guess now.
Okay, that's significant.
One section per grade level.
Quite the mess.
Let me see if I can, I'm gonna take another stab at this. So the CDC makes guidelines and the districts can, the states can adopt whatever additional guidelines or do work within those guidelines, but it doesn't, I mean, they can't totally disregard the CDC.
They can.
Really?
There's guidelines.
Okay.
There's no oversight or no, they're guidelines.
But aren't they opening themselves up to liability if they,
Sure.
just like, I mean, ISBE will issue guidelines.
Right.
But we can't really go against them, otherwise we'd be opening ourselves up to for liability if we had an explosion of COVID cases here and, you know, a child lost their life or something. And if, you know, it were to be found that we weren't, you know, they had told us that we had to wear masks and we just decided to not have them wear masks, it would be, we'd be taking that liability on ourselves rather than, so I think it's important to know that when these ISBE guidelines come out, even though they're only guidelines, they're not technically laws, we would open the district up to a huge amount of liability if we didn't abide by them. We just went rogue. So we're all anxiously awaiting those. Have you gotten any more hints as to what?
Nothing. Nope.
Interesting.
Nope.
Okay.
Many of our colleagues are very frustrated. So
Well, I mean, we're only
month and a half.
out. Some districts less. Depending on when
High school.
the start dates are, yeah.
Then you have issues depending on what it is they're requiring. Are we even through the supply chain even gonna get it in time? That's why we
Yeah.
went ahead and started doing a few things ahead of time, but I'm sure there are gonna be things that we didn't. That may become issues just like in the hospitals where they had difficulty getting a lot of the PPE supplies. If every school in the state's out there trying to buy this stuff, not only in Illinois, but across the country, and they haven't ramped up production.
Okay.
That's it. Not a whole lot of news yet.
Never a dull moment.
Hopefully by July.
2020 is such an exciting year. Okay. Does anybody have further questions for Dr. Lynn about the return to learn? And on to future agenda items. We have press policy updates, review of board self-governance goals, the drafted revised goals, review of board agreements, construction change orders, review, are we still gonna have more of those? Or we just?
So there's
it's a
one more for the
placeholder?
paving,
Oh, that's right, you
and
said.
then we, hopefully soon they'll start on the house. So hopefully there'll be nothing there, but especially with some of the windows that were rotted and the thing that's rotting, I wouldn't be surprised if we find some additional items that are not safe. You know, even when we did like a month ago, we walked over there with the architect and the contractor, and there were some of the railings on the sides that all of a sudden were just kind of swinging that when we looked at it last fall, were secure. So there are going to be a few items there, I'm sure. Hopefully nothing major, nothing like what we had so far, but there'll be a few minor things.
And review and revise the board agenda calendar, review superintendent evaluation. Wait, review super, it's just
Oh.
superintendent. It's just review, so the superintendent evaluation. That's board self-evaluation with IASB, the diverse staff conversation. What did we decide about the board self-evaluation?
We haven't.
Haven't, okay. So maybe we'll add that to the cal next time. Okay. Let me just write that. Make sure that gets thanks. All right, on to the superintendent report.
My report is all COVID all the time. It's about remote learning and return to learn and other discussions scattered into the mix, but that's primarily our discussions. Today I had a great conversation with a friend with Veronica, a friend from North Chicago, race and what they're doing in North Chicago, and that was very fascinating to be part of that conversation. So I appreciated that. Also, with the former AX, I wrote the letter to the open letter to the board. That group had a conversation tonight at 4 o'clock. Just general conversations about what we can do to make our communities more welcoming, less biased, as we were talking about earlier. Because every one of us has our own. So good discussions so far. Also, I am having just an open Zoom meeting on Wednesday. If people want to join, just to give an up, I won't have much to update other than what I just said tonight, but to have that conversation and keep the discussion going with our community. I will not have any next week, but then starting July 8th, every Wednesday, have at least 2 on every Wednesday is my plan for it, and every week in July going forward with open conversations for parents and teachers to come in, ask questions, discuss different options. And as we roll out options, as we put some more thoughts and plans into this, I think there'll be a lot more conversation. So we'll need more feedback. It's not a lot to go on yet.
What time is the meeting on Wednesday?
I think it's 3.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
That's it for me. Then next week though, for July 4th week. Give everybody a break.
Onto the business office report. Dr. Johns?
Okay, I'll just highlight a couple of things. The energy curtailment. This year's event is this Wednesday for an hour from like noon to 1. Just to point out that we just received our second half of the check from last year, so we got a total of $7,437 for dialing down our energy use for an hour a year. This coming year, though, they are also going to be doing a winter event as well as the summer event. So basically just a way to look at if there would be a threat to the energy grid, the electrical grid or whatever, that, you know, we would be one of those that could voluntarily choose to make our reductions so that the grid doesn't collapse. The ESSER's grant, we're in the process of applying for that. I believe we have to get that in prior to June 30th. And probably the easiest would be just to look at putting it, we've got $21,962. So looking at some of the protective barriers for the office. So far I've gotten quotes ranging from 4,700 to about 10,000. But those are things that I will need to go ahead and order as soon as I can finalize it. I know one of the vendors I was talking to commented that people who wait till like the middle of July probably won't see it in time for school to start in the fall if we actually are able to begin in August. Because there's, you know, a 2 to 4 week time frame to get those things. And everybody's buying So I've at least been told we're kind of on the beginning edge of, a lot of districts haven't even approached what it is they're going to do, so that's a positive. Property tax collection, I actually have an update because I got an email later, would have been after I left work today. But we're getting another 2 and another 5 and $2.25 million tomorrow. So that will put us up to about 45% collection. Typically, we end up getting about 50% in the summer and another 50% in the fall. I did have some concerns over the fact that people would have the option of paying a quarter of their bill in June, a quarter in August, a quarter in September, and a quarter in November. So by looking at what I just got today, it makes it look a lot better than it did when I put this report together yesterday.
So what percent of taxpayers in our district do you think took advantage of that?
I'll know better once we get, because we'll get probably another payment in July. That'll be some of this money, but I would guess a fairly small number. I do know that what I was that the people who have mortgages and have escrow, the escrow companies have to make the full payment. They don't have, I mean, by law, I think they have to do that. Not that the county would require them to, but it's easier for them just to make that payment out of the escrow account, twice a year as opposed to once. So, with getting about 45% collection by tomorrow, I'm going to guess that it's a fairly small number. Or it's not a large amount. It's not the big taxpayers, which we don't have very many of those, but we've got a few.
Yeah. So most people are probably escrowed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just mention that we do have a meeting scheduled, a phone conference next week with the auditor. And I apologize, I know they're coming in July. I think it's toward the end of July, but they are going to be here in person. So I did talk to them today about using, I think it's room 207, and we've got three large computer tables in there, so that, and the most auditors we've had here at once has been 3. So we can separate them, and then if they need to talk with Carly or Bonnie or I, there's enough room in that room that we can actually go in and have the spacing that we need to keep everyone safe. And then it's also right next door, so they'll have easy access to the files. We can either call over them, we can pull them, and walk them over and lay them on a table, and we can go get them and take them. Pretty good at that, laying things down, letting somebody come pick it up, as opposed to just always passing it. Because it's really not far enough.
All these little life adjustments.
Totally different.
Thank you, Dr. Johns. Does anybody have any questions for Steve? Okay, on to board reports. I know Jim has something.
Oh, okay. So you want me to go first, huh? Yes? Okay. I wanted to float an idea about sending letters of appreciation to the Lindenhurst Police Department and to the Cook County Sheriff's Department. Just to kind of pat on the back, maybe, just to be to thank them that they are around, should there be any, difficulties during school. And, this is basically because the police, in my opinion, have been getting a pretty bad rap lately. And I don't know what the officers or the deputies, may or may not be feeling, but in a lot of ways, I think we owe some appreciation to them. And, maybe just a thought of, hey, we're thinking about you, and it might not be a bad idea, and it may go a long way. So I guess the question is, what would the thoughts be on one or two letters, one to each agency from the board?
I was talking to Jim earlier, and while not wanting to wait until like the broader political ramifications about it, I think it's always appropriate to express gratitude for people who look after us. So I know that from what you said, Denise, our and what Dr. Linda said in the past, our police officers have gone out of their way to make themselves available to us and to support us. And I think it's appropriate that we as a board acknowledge that. I think that would be nice. And I was thinking maybe we send them a letter that we all sign. And that might be just a nice thing. I think we should do that more often. I think we should, you know, when people, you know, serve us, that it makes sense. What do you know?
And Jim, I think you said Cook County Sheriff's Office, but you meant Lake County,
He did,
correct?
yeah.
My apologies, you know.
I didn't know.
It's very hard to shake the Chicago off of yourself once you escape. So of course I meant the Lake County deputies.
Awesome idea, Jim.
What does everybody think? Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think just maybe a note to say, you know, we anticipate continued relations, just like we do with the fire department,
Mm-hmm.
just like the police department, whoever services the school. And we also have an agreement between the local police department. Is that renewed annually for information sharing? I know there was something within this last year that just came up,
Mm-hmm.
that there was an agreement about it.
The Lake County Sheriff at least.
Yeah.
It's not an annual, it's
It does
a,
not require annual renewal.
Oh, it was just a new.
yeah, an updated memorandum of understanding or something like that.
I think it's important to make strides on all fronts. Like a lot of maligned groups. I mean, all groups. People are being grouped now instead of being treated as individuals. And I mean that it doesn't matter what side of the political fence you're on. People are being pushed into groups rather than being addressed as individuals. And I think that's wrong.
I think if we can go out of our way to not be that way, I think that would be good, and it would be
See others as
consistent
individuals.
with our strategic plan. It would be consistent with the community that we serve. So. Okay, and if anybody else thinks of someone else they'd like to send a letter to of appreciation, anybody who serves us, feel free to reach out. And I'm going to work with Jim on this week. I'm looking forward to that. And we'll bring something to the next meeting, and hopefully everybody will like it. We'll send it out to you. So great. Does anybody else have board reports? In the summer, it's usually pretty. I don't think, I mean, we're meeting every week, Denise and Dr. Lind and I. And if you ever have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to me, because I will at least have that information that we shared. I'm more than happy to discuss anything at any time. So, all right. Is that it? There being no further business, I'd like to move that we adjourn to closed session for the purpose of collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
Second.
Okay, roll call please, Veronica.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Lori,
Yes.
Ms. Casvano Troy,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes.
Okay. passes, and we are adjourned to closed session. Thank you, everyone who tuned